Just finally, before I throw to Brett to talk about the numbers of the day, you would all be, two matters. Firstly, you'd all be aware that at around 5:30 yesterday evening, 17 people from New Zealand, having travelled on an international flight from New Zealand to Sydney, were then allowed to board a plane and travel to Melbourne. They didn't spend very long at the airport. They left the airport within only minutes, really, of having arrived. Our officers have absolutely no power to stop someone, to detain someone in those circumstances, particularly given that they were coming from a very low virus part of the world. New Zealand is, and we're very pleased for them, in a very different set of circumstances to the circumstances that we're in Victoria. We are still waiting. I'm not quite sure why we're waiting, but we are still waiting for Australian Border Force to provide us with the passenger cards for each of those 17 people. As soon as we get that detail, we will be visiting each of those people and making sure that they are fully up to date, as it were, when it comes to the rules, the regulations, the structures that we have in Victoria. They need to be briefed on those things so that they're doing the right thing. I'm not sure that any of them would necessarily need to be tested, but of course just giving them the benefit of a clear understanding of what's required in Victoria, whether you're from Victoria or not, is very, very important. I just want to be absolutely clear on this. I've written to the Prime Minister this morning. We're very disappointed that this has happened, given that I had the previous day, or maybe the day before, written to the Prime Minister on this very issue, saying that at some point we will join that New Zealand-Australia travel bubble, but that's not appropriate now. This is effectively possible because we have not closed our border. I don't think these people could have travelled domestically into other states where borders are closed. That's exactly what the Prime Minister wants. We have done that, and now we see 17 people turning up on our doorstep without any notice, without any structure, and we still can't even get the cards from Australian Border Force as to who these people are and where they have gone. We hopefully will get that very soon. But I have written this morning just to make it plain. There's more flights coming on Sunday from New Zealand, and we do not want a repeat of this, where people, albeit not having a go at them, those 17 people or whoever might seek to come to Melbourne or come to Victoria on Sunday, but surely it's not beyond those who are responsible for the borders of our nation, making sure that only those who are in that New Zealand bubble can receive domestic passengers after they have arrived into an international airport. I'm confident that we'll get to the bottom of this by the end of the day, and we'll be in contact with each of those people and just make sure they know and fully understand what the rules are, what they have to do, masks, all the way through to those reasons to leave your home, so on and so forth. But I just thought it was appropriate to give you some background to that.
Just before you go on there, were you aware of the legislative position that there was no power to detain?
Well, I'm not certain, Noel, because I don't think we'd ever really turned our mind to this happening. Our position had been very clear. We are not in the New Zealand bubble. So we certainly know now that if there's unauthorised arrivals, if people are arriving and we just don't know, we have no way of knowing, we can be clear that there's no international flights arriving into Melbourne. But what we can't be clear on, well, I think we are now, but we couldn't last night be clear on the notion of them being allowed to freely travel from Sydney. So I'm confident that we won't see more of this until we get to the point, and I am confident we'll get to the point fairly soon, maybe, where we can have people from New Zealand travel, and indeed people from Victoria can travel into New Zealand if they think that's appropriate. But at a time when Victorians can't freely move around their own state for the best of public health reasons, it's not acceptable to me that people from another country, when we've expressly said that we don't want this to happen now, are able to get into Melbourne without us knowing. No warning, no. In fact, it is exactly the opposite of what we signed up for. It's happened now, it can't be undone, but our focus is on getting those cards, getting to those people, having a conversation with them about what's required of them now that they're in our state, Noel, the other point is because we haven't got the cards, I can't tell you whether they're New Zealand citizens, whether they're Australian citizens. I know where they came from. I know how they got here. As a matter of fact, in terms of the method of transport, I don't know how they got here in a policy sense, because I had been express in my view that this should not happen now. It can happen in weeks or months' time, but it can't happen now.
I mean, where are they right now?
Well, until Australian Border Force give us the cards, we have no way of knowing.
Are they in Victoria?
They are in Victoria, and we assume they're in metropolitan Melbourne, and we will make contact with them as soon as Australian Border Force provide us with the cards, those disembarkation cards that we've all filled out many, many times. Hopefully by the time I finish standing up here today, those cards will be available.
How frustrating is it that it's taking so long? Is that upwards of 12 hours?
Well, it's a lengthy period of time. The good news is they've come from a very low virus place. It's not like they've come from some other parts of the world that are absolutely hotspots. But again, we'll get to the bottom of it and we'll make contact with them, and then we'll focus our energies not so much on being frustrated on what's happened, but making sure that we prevent any further people arriving unless and until we get to a point when we can accept and be part of that bubble. We're not opposed to that, and we're not for a moment casting aspersions on the state of public health in New Zealand. What we are just simply saying is surely our systems are better than this. Which I think is a fair thing to say. I stand here every day making sure that every Victorian knows they can't just freely move around their own state for the best of reasons, and at the same time we've got people being allowed in from another country, and we were literally the last ones to find out about it. It just doesn't make any sense.
Should they be fined then? Should they face a fine?
No, I don't know that they've necessarily done anything wrong.
Broken any law, rule?
Well, again, that'd be looked at, but I don't think so. But what we're really keen to do is to make sure that we have a conversation with them and that they know, got to wear a mask, the whole checklist of things that we're all very well used to. None of us are pleased about it, but we know about it. We need to be confident that they do, so that they can.
Send them back?
Well, let's work out who they are first and where they are, and we'll be able to do that once Australian Border Force provide those cards, which my advice as I walked in this morning is we haven't got those yet, but hopefully we'll get those very soon.
But if they're not Australian citizens, then should they be asked to leave?
Well, let's first of all work out. Well, see, I don't issue visas. I don't control the free movement from other countries into our country, and nor do I want to. That's not a matter for us. That's a matter for the Commonwealth Government. The bubble arrangement is a perfectly reasonable thing, but not to Victoria at this time, and that's why we made that point clear. That would appear it hasn't gone through down to the level that it needed to, and these people have arrived, done nothing wrong in arriving in Sydney, but then they themselves haven't done anything wrong in trying to come to Melbourne, but they shouldn't have been allowed to come to Melbourne because we've not signed on to that bubble. It's very difficult to know about what their status is and the notion, to answer your question, until we know who they are, where they are, and what their status is. For what reason are they here? For all we know, and this is the most challenging part of it, because we all ought to know much more than we do, but the system has not worked particularly well. They could be from our state. We'll just have to wait and see.